Okay, well, we're here with Donald Hunt here, and to share some very vital information. And as we talk about this, Tom and I are going to try to bring out the information and help Donald bring out the information as well as possible. Donald, you were in the military, and when was it that you went into the military?
I was inducted in the military in Battle Creek, Michigan.
Okay, and what branch?
I didn't have any branch of the Army until I got to Fort Lewis, Washington.
Okay.
And then I was placed in the infantry.
Okay, all right. And now you went in as a conscientious objector, is that right?
That's right.
And what does that mean?
That means that I refused to bear arms.
Okay. And so that they knew perfectly well what your decision was when you went in?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Now, when you went in, it wasn't just all peaches and cream. You did have a couple of difficulties in that because of that. Is that right?
That's right. I had when I was in the infantry, we went out into the field, and the lieutenant ordered me to take a rifle. And I said, "I'm sorry, sir, I can't." And then he cursed at me and told me to go see the captain, and I went to see the captain, and I came back and he cursed at me again and told me to get out. And so I went back to the captain, and then that evening I was transferred to the medical detachment of the 324th Infantry Division.
All right, so you went from the infantry to medical.
Right.
Okay. And so now we know about Desmond Doss, and when Desmond Doss went through his struggles, that was before this time, is that right?
Yes.
But apparently everybody had a good understanding of that story of what happened with him and other conscientious objectors.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah. And how many, you were telling me how many conscientious objectors there were at that time?
Well, I had another young man who was with me when I got into the 103rd Evacuation Hospital. I was alone by myself when I was in the infantry. Mm-hmm. And when I was in the medical part of the infantry, they placed me under arrest and said I had to stay in the barracks, and it was there, when I was there in my barracks, I prayed and I didn't know what to do, and I prayed again and I didn't get an answer. And then I just determined, no matter what, I was not going to disobey what I knew God wanted me to do. And from then on, nothing mattered.
And how did that all turn out?
Well, I just jumped from a frying pan to the fire, and they put me in the 103rd Evacuation Hospital, and when the sun went down, we said we couldn't do any more, and then they sent a full bird colonel and a major to make me do Max and I do something. They told me to carry litters. Well, there were no litters, there were no wounded, and therefore I told them, "Sorry, sir, I can't." And then they placed me under arrest, and that started the court-martial.
So we moved from the issue of being a conscientious objector to something else that was a reason for you being a conscientious objector, was because you were a Christian, right?
Right.
And then, but you weren't just a Christian, you were a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, is that right?
That's right.
And so as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, you were also coming in not just as a conscientious objector, but as a Sabbath keeper.
That's correct.
All right, and so that's what moved us into that from the frying pan to the fire. When they moved you to the hospital, now it came out that you weren't going to work on the Sabbath.
That's correct. And the Jewish chaplain told us when the sun went down, and we were watching with our watches, and when it happened, they told the rest of the guys to go get lost, and we left, and then before we could get out into the woods, the major and the colonel came and gave us the order.
So from what you were telling us, they were actually setting you up, weren't they?
They surely were.
Tom, go ahead.
Let me interject here. It says that this is a letter. On June 18, they had their final test, and June 18 happened to be on a Friday. They had their final test at the completion of their basic training, which was to last for 17 hours till about 11 o'clock Friday night. It says here, the boys knew, Dad and this other man knew this 2 weeks in advance. So they knew that in 2 weeks they were going to have this test on Friday that was going to 11 o'clock. And they had said, we can't do it. They went, and it says, and tried to arrange to be excused when the sun went down. But they were told that they would not be excused, and that they would be watched to see that they did take part and finish up in these tests. So 2 weeks they'd been trying to arrange this, and they're saying, no, this is your final exam. Nobody misses this, and you guys will work all the way till 11 o'clock. So, and then they brought the major and the colonel out there to make sure that he did, and then they told him, look, you can carry a litter, but it was just all play for maneuvers. And so Dad said, I can't. And then the colonel and the major said, you're under arrest. And then the court-martial came.
Wow. So this was actually a court-martial. What does that mean, court-martial?
Oh, that means I think there were 9 men. This is they had 9 men, 9 officers that were there serving as judge and jury.
Okay, so you were taken to a court, and this is a military court, and there they found you guilty of what?
Of refusing to an officer's command.
All right, and refusing an officer, but this wasn't just any officer, as we found out. It was a colonel and a
Major.
And a major.
Okay. Well, if in the according to this the Articles of War, 107, I think it was, if you disobeyed any officer, you could be shot.
Oh, any officer. But they wanted to make sure this was before the more important ones, more powerful ones. Okay, so these guys would not normally have been there. Is that correct?
Oh no, you would. They would never have sent a colonel and a major after you. It should have been a sergeant. That's the way they usually did things in the Army.
Okay, and so you still stood up for the Sabbath. You would not work on the Sabbath, even, and this idea of they telling you to carry a stretcher. My understanding is then from you is that they were just doing makeup work. There wasn't a real need for the stretcher. They just wanted you to take it over to another area.
Yeah, that was just trying to play soldier.
Yeah. And so you said no, because that wasn't falling under the line of doing good on the Sabbath. They wanted you to work on the Sabbath.
That's right.
Okay. So you got court-martialed ultimately, and that means they sent you to prison. Is that right?
That's right.
And so while you're in prison, what were your thoughts then? Were you the idea that you were going to get out?
Well, actually, we were better off in prison because we found out that if we did KP, that's kitchen police, if you did KP, you could work 3 days and have one off, so we just traded with one man who would rather have Sunday, so we got off on Sabbath while we were there in the stockade.
So even in prison, you were determined to keep the Sabbath.
That's right.
Amen. And then, but God was faithful. He hadn't forgotten you, did he?
No, sir.
What happened? Because you were not in there for very long. How long were you actually in there?
57 days.
57 days, okay. And so what happened that we find out, Tom, you're holding this letter in that you read part of, but who is this letter from? What was the purpose of this letter?
Yes, at the court-martial, Dad was in trouble, and so our church came to his aid, and this is a letter from Mr. T.M. Cole, who is the Seventh-day Adventist War Service Commission, and he was supposed to, go to bat for not just Seventh-day Adventists. Here it says for a Baptist or anybody that was for religious liberty. But this thing it looked like it might go further. It looked like it might go all the way to Washington. And so this is Mr. Cole's letter to Carlisle B. Haynes, Seventh-day Adventist War Service Commission in Tacoma Park, Washington, pleading on Dad's behalf. But it was interesting because at this court-martial, they asked him, it says the president of the commission asked Dad if he understood about the articles of war, and he said yes, and Donald said, yes, sir. The president asked him if he understood that to disobey an order from a superior officer could be death. Donald looked him straight in the eye and said, yes, sir. So then his response, he says, I was interested in these other chaplains, in two chaplains, one a Baptist, and I do not know some other church who was very touched at this response and said, God bless you. And the Baptist actually went away weeping. We do not know why it is necessary for such young men to go through such trials, but they stood just as faithful and just as great a trial as Daniel did or any other man of God in years gone by. So this is Dad's Daniel's experience.
Yeah, literally, because this shows us and tells us that you didn't have just prison time to be worried about. Your life was literally on the line in this situation.
Yes, sir. That's right.
And yet you were trusting in God, just as Daniel did. And so God blessed, because we find out it did not go to Washington.
It was dismissed.
It was actually dismissed, and you were showing me earlier the paper, the dismissal, the discharge paper. Thank you on that, and because why did they do that? Why did they decide at that point?
Yeah, the court-martial the intent of the court-martial was to dishonorably discharge in disgrace, but it ended up getting dismissed and out of court, and so now he's got the discharge papers of honorable discharge.
Yes. Yeah, amen. And that's it's so powerful. It wasn't just okay, we'll just let you out of prison and then be dishonorably discharged. Yeah, no, you left with the understanding you were telling me that there were 30 of you. Is that right? That they were giving
30.
giving this other letter. I forgot what unit citation.
Unit citation that told us what a good boy it was.
And so all 30 of you, basically what they were saying is that you're not just a typical soldier. They were giving you a special recognition. Is that right?
That was right. Well, they gave it to 30 of us, so that because it was telling us basically what we did and how we did it and how wonderfully well we did do it.
Amen.
Let me just point out that the honorable discharge came years later.
Thank you.
The court martial was dismissed, and so the colonel said, "Hunt, we can't get rid of you one way." And they sent him off to the front, and he had to go into the thickest of the fighting and went through. He was on the coast of Normandy just after D-Day. He was in the liberation of France as a medic again, conscientious objector. He was in the Battle of the Bulge and saw some tremendous fighting. And then, so at the end of the war, then years later, is when he got this dishonorable discharge.
And you also got a letter from President
Truman.
Yeah.
And what was that letter saying?
Well, he was just praising us all for all the troops for what they were doing there in Germany. You
let me read that letter, and I tell you, that was a very nicely written letter. That was it definitely made me feel like he was truly honoring you men. Yeah. You know, Donald, I we thank God for how He has worked for you and even through you, because just like Desmond Doss and how his story spread and touched the lives of other people and strengthened other people, you too are one who, because of your stalwartness and your faithfulness to God, we're also a witness to many other people. And even right now, that's why we're recording it, to be able to strengthen brothers and sisters that are in the church who are also potentially facing struggles of their own with the Sabbath. And, we thank God that He used you so well. And I personally want to thank you also for your service and your work in the military on behalf of this nation, because that says a lot, and you did a lot. And thankfully, President Truman gave that clear recognition to you and for all of us. And we thank you. I want to shake your hand. Thank you so much, Donald. Thank you. Tom, thank you so much for your help. I appreciate that very much. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, Pastor Kearbey.
So my father was court-martialed for the Sabbath issues, and the colonel that did it was Colonel Paul E. Martin, and was in grave trouble. And so the first letter I have to read is a letter from T.M. Cole, our Seventh-day Adventist War Service Commission, to Elder Carlisle B. Haynes, Seventh-day Adventist War Service Commission in Tacoma Park, Washington, D.C. And so this is what the letter says. Dear Elder Haynes, we have been having some very trying and interesting experiences here of late. One of our young men, a few weeks ago, refused to go out on a parade on Sabbath morning, and charges were filed against him. I went to everyone along the line, from the commanding officer to the general, and was successful in getting the thing thrown out. And this boy is being given his Sabbath privileges now without any trouble. But we have had difficulty in another outfit that has not worked out so well. We had 2 Seventh-day Adventist boys in the 103rd Evacuation Hospital, 4th Corps Troop, Fort Lewis, Washington, by the names of Donald C. Hunt of Battle Creek, Michigan, and Max Thomas of North Bend, Washington. These young men have had continual trouble over the Sabbath, and I have a number of times interviewed their officers and gotten things temporarily settled, but on June 18 they had their final tests at the completion of their basic training, which lasted for 17 hours till about 11 o'clock Friday night. The boys knew this about 2 weeks in advance and tried to arrange to be excused when the sun went down, but they were told that they would not be excused, but that they would be watched to see that they did take part and finish up in these tests. I encouraged the boys to do their very best and to stay with it until the sun went down, which they did. At this time, a command was given before witnesses for them to carry on, and they said that they would not be able to do any more work till the Sabbath was over, so they were placed under arrest and charges were filed against them. The chaplain of their outfit belongs to the Dutch Reformed Church and took great interest in the case. He did everything I believe that we could expect any man to do to help the boys. I also did all I know to do, but yesterday they were brought to trial by a special court-martial. They had a very good defense who seemed to put himself in the boys' place, and they were proved guilty and sentenced to 6 months at hard labor and 2/3 of their pay withheld for 6 months. I was asked to come before the court and explain to the court how we kept the Sabbath when the Sabbath began and ends, and what we believe it is right to do on the Sabbath and what we felt would be wrong for us to do. Elder V.T. Armstrong, who is now working with us in camp pastor work in this union, was there, and a large number of chaplains and other outfits from various outfits. I am told that the affair has stirred the fort. Many officers are in favor of the Adventists, and some are violently opposed to Adventists being granted any privileges. Owing to the fact that I was to be a witness, I only heard part of the trial, but Elder Armstrong is writing to you, giving you an account of what took place. I was very much interested when Donald Hunt was being asked his last questions by the president of the court. The president asked him if he took special notice of Article of War 64 when he heard them read. He said that he did not take any particular notice of that article any more than the others. The president asked him if he understood what that article of war meant. Donald said, "Yes, sir." The president asked him if he understood that to disobey an order from a superior officer could be death. Donald looked him straight in the eye and said, "Yes, sir." I was interested in 2 chaplains, one a Baptist, and I do not know what church the other belongs to, but they seemed very much touched about the deal and came and shook hands and said, "God bless you," and this Baptist went away weeping. We do not know why it is necessary for such young men to go through such trials, but they stood just as faithful and just as great a trial as Daniel did or any other man of God in years gone by. This case will be reviewed by the colonel who appointed the court, then by the 4th Corps area judge advocate, then by the general of the 4th Corps of someone whom he will appoint. Any one of these has the power to minimize the sentence or suspend the sentence or throw the whole thing out. And I have been told that it is very possible that it will be cleared before it gets to the general office. If it goes on to Washington, I know you will do anything that you can to get the matter straightened up when it comes to Washington. I hope that something will be done to clear the case, not only for the benefit of these boys out, for those who will suffer if it is found that an Adventist does not have Sabbath privileges. Very sincerely, your brother in Christ, T.M. Cole, Seventh-day Adventist War Service Commission. So again, this colonel was Colonel B. Martin that is preceding the court-martial. So it was Colonel Paul E. Martin that court-martialed Dad. He was the one that Dad, quotes, disobeyed the direct command to go work in the field on Sabbath. And then he was the one that when the court-martial pardoned him, the case came out in Dad's favor, then said, well, Hunt, we can't get rid of you one way, then we'll send you to the front. So he did not like Father and was determined to get rid of him one way or another. But interestingly enough, the same Paul E. Martin at the end of the war writes this certificate of merit, so which I will read now. This is Headquarters 103rd Evacuation Hospital, European Theater of Operations, United States Army. This certificate of merit is awarded to Technician Grade 5 Donald C. Hunt Jr. 364549196 in recognition of conspicuously meritorious and outstanding performance of military duty. Citation: for fulfilling his duties as surgical technician from the 25th of July 1944 to the 8th of May 1945 in a highly creditable manner, the work to which he was assigned was completed in a manner consistent with the high standards set for the medical department. His devotion to duty and his interest in the comfort and the welfare of patients assigned to his care have been outstanding. His administrative duties and his care of the sick and wounded over long months have been accomplished with an unselfish generosity and efficiency which deserves high commendation. Paul E. Martin, Colonel, MC Commanding. The same general that wanted to get rid of him. I mean, Colonel. So this is a letter of commendation to my father, Donald C. Hunt Jr., from Harry Truman himself, and it says, Donald C. Hunt Jr., to you who answered the call of your country and served in its armed forces to bring about the total defeat of the enemy, I extend the heartfelt thanks of a grateful nation. As one of the nation's finest, you undertook the most severe task one can be called upon to perform. Because you demonstrated the fortitude, resourcefulness, and calm judgment necessary to carry out that task, we now look to you for leadership and example in further exalting our country in peace. Harry Truman, The White House.